Emma and Artur had planned a weekend trip to close the distance in their long-standing relationship. Emma worked for a public relations agency, and Artur was a freelance photographer. In recent months, they hadn't had time for each other and had begun to feel a coldness in their relationship. So a quiet getaway in the middle of nature seemed like a good opportunity for both of them. Eventually, the weekend arrived. Emma and Artur didn't prefer to use navigation, so they used an old map and started walking towards a mountainous area quite far from the city. They took an old forest road that was not visible on the map. The further they went, the wilder the nature became, and the more neglected the roads became. Just as they were about to make a turn, the vehicle suddenly stopped. The engine wouldn't start, and the phones didn't receive a signal. They had to get out of the car and continue on foot. The hour had advanced. The moonlight was barely visible through the trees. Despite the rotten tree branches, the ominous silence, and the occasional humming, they continued onward. After a few hours, deep in the dense forest, they found an old dilapidated hut. The windows were boarded up, and the door was half open. When they entered, there was a heavy, musty smell. The walls were covered in moss, and there were broken pieces of animal bones on the floor. Slowly, they began to examine the house. There were writings on the walls. The most striking sentence was,
"Those who enter here can never leave."
Emma saw this and gave a nervous laugh.
"It's probably a hunter's joke,"
she said. Artur was more attentive, focusing on every detail and thinking that the hut was some kind of trap. But there was nothing else to do. They had already decided to spend the night there. As night fell, the sound of an animal scratching the wood with its claw could be heard outside. The old boards of the hut groaned with the sound. When they opened the door, they could see no one, but there were footprints everywhere on the wet earth, as if their bare footprints had wrapped around the hut. Artur wanted to follow the tracks with his flashlight, but Emma argued with him.
"What are we doing wandering in the woods in the middle of the night?"
She stopped him. In the middle of the night, Emma woke up screaming and looked for Artur, but he was not in his bed. Artur called from outside.
"Emma! Emma! Come out! I'm here!"
Emma opened the door, and the cold wind made her shiver. When her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she looked up at the roof of the hut. Artur was hanging there. His eyes were gouged out, his mouth sewn shut. His body swayed slowly with the wind. Emma stood frozen. Just then, a whisper came from the hut.
"It's your turn."
Emma screamed in fear and ran out of the hut, plunging into the forest. Emma ran for hours in the woods. She had lost her sense of direction. Her body was scratched with thorns, and her feet were covered in blood. Every time she stopped, she heard the sound of dry branches breaking behind her. Every time Emma heard these sounds, she kept running, thinking that someone or something was following her. Whispers began to swirl in her head. Her sense of reality was gone, and she didn't know what to do. In the early morning light, a hunter found Emma in the woods, bleeding, barefoot, and with her clothes torn. There was unimaginable fear in her eyes. He kept mumbling the same things.
"She is still there. She has no eyes. But she sees me. She is following me."
The hunter handed Emma over to the authorities. Emma was taken to hospital, but did not respond to treatment and died in hospital. Soon after, Emma's bag contained the last photographs Artur had taken. An old hut deep in the woods with dried blood around it, and in the last photo, as Artur looked into the lens, a faint figure without eyes could be seen in the trees behind him. Alice and Amy have been close friends since college. Their shared passion for nature and photography often took them to remote places. This time, their destination was a forest that was not on the maps, but was referred to as a hidden paradise on forums. Believing that they could capture unique landscapes away from the crowds, they began to plan. Finally, they finalized their plans and set off early in the morning for the trip. When they arrived in the forest, the GPS suddenly started to lose signal. There was no cell phone reception, and the compass was drifting. They thought about turning back, but they both loved adventure, so they kept walking. As the sun slowly retreated behind the trees, the forest grew darker and quieter. As the clock ticked, the paths blurred into each other. By the time they realized they were lost, it was too late. They decided to pitch a tent, and after pitching it, they started to walk around. While looking around, they found an old hand mirror covered with moss, almost buried in the roots of a tree. The mirror was a strange mirror. It was rusty, and the frame was cracked, and the glass looked as if it was fogged from the inside. Alice picked it up and looked into it. Behind the mirror stood someone who looked exactly like her, but his eyes were completely black and his expression dull. The reflection in the mirror was smiling, but the smile was so horrible that it made her feel uneasy. Alice dropped the mirror in fear. When Amy looked in the mirror, she noticed something even stranger. Alice was not in the mirror. Her own reflection was there, but Alice's reflection was completely erased from the mirror. It was as if she had never been there. They told each other that it was a trick of fatigue and stress and decided to go to sleep. But nothing was the same after that. As night fell, they began to hear light footsteps around their tent. At first, they thought it was animals, but it sounded more like human footsteps. The footsteps would go around the tent and then stop. Alice took her flashlight and went outside. When she turned to the back of the tent, she saw Amy there. She was standing still, her head tilted slightly to the side. "Amy?" she said in a whisper, but Amy's voice came from inside the tent. "Alice, where are you going?" Alice looked back at Amy behind the tent. Her face was still hidden, but her body was beginning to tremble. The thing started walking slowly towards her. Alice ran screaming, but the paths in the forest had disappeared, and the trees had become denser and darker. She tried to turn back, but she no longer knew where she was. When Amy woke up in the morning, she realized that Alice was not in the tent. She found the mirror where they had left it, but this time the inside of the mirror was clear, and the reflection, Alice's face, was looking at her and smiling. Amy's eyes did not leave the mirror. Alice's reflection tilted its head to the side and winked. When Amy tried to move away from the mirror, she realized that her body was not moving. The surface of the mirror suddenly went black. Then Alice's reflection took on a black-eyed shape in the darkness behind it. Amy screamed and ran away. When she was found hours later by a forest ranger, her hair was gray, her eyes staring into space. She repeated the following sentence in a shaky voice. "That mirror, the people in it want to get out. They can't get out unless someone takes their place." Authorities searched the area, but no trace of Alice or the mirror was found. However, after that day, the authorities received 3 to 4 complaints about a few people who went to take photographs in the same forest and left the forest, saying that a smiling face was reflected in their lenses. Harry and Laura were old friends who had been in each other's lives since childhood. After graduating from university, they met for the first time. To reminisce, and relax, they decided to go to an old forest route far from the city that no one had visited for years. On the second day of their journey, during a misty morning walk, they found a circular, well-like pit surrounded by stones in the dense trees. The stones were arranged as if by human hands, none of them irregular, the spaces between them even. Harry and Laura's eyes fell on an old black notebook lying at the bottom of the pit, its pages blistered with moisture and moldy around the edges, but still readable. Harry picked up the diary and began to read aloud. The writing was in a very old handwriting. The pages of the diary were filled with accounts of someone talking about loneliness, darkness, and voices coming. As they neared the end, one sentence stood out. It was written in shaky letters on the last page of the diary. "Whoever looks in this hole, I'll take his place." Harry laughed at this sentence and said, "What nonsense!" But Laura's face was pale. She couldn't take her eyes off the pit. She looked long and hard at the bottom of the pit and saw someone there. It was Harry, same face, same clothes, but there was something strange. The can in the pit had red eyes. He was looking at Laura with eyes as if they were painted with blood. Laura took a step back. "Harry, you," she said. But Harry didn't hear her. He was still studying the diary. Laura couldn't explain what had happened, but a feeling of dread came over her. They decided to stop there that night and pitched their tents. That night, neither of them spoke to each other. Only the wind and the whispers in the trees were heard. The next morning, when Laura woke up, Harry was gone. It was cold inside the tent. Harry's bag was still there, but there was no sign of him. She called out for Harry, shouting into the forest, but there was no answer. She walked for days, finally managing to get out of the woods and get help. When he got home, he couldn't make sense of what had happened. He was still haunted by Harry's reflection in the pit. When she looked in the bathroom mirror that night, her heart stopped. She was looking at her own face in the mirror, but her eyes were Harry's. He was watching her from across the room with a deep, familiar, but alien gaze. From that day on, Lara didn't talk to anyone. She didn't make eye contact or say a word to anyone, not the psychologists, not the doctors, not her family. At night, she would wake up and stare out the window for hours. In the morning, she would look through old maps. Finally, one morning he left home without telling anyone and never returned. Weeks passed. Some hikers camped around a stone pit at the edge of the forest, said that in the distance, a woman was kneeling beside the stones, staring into the pit. She was silent, motionless, just looking, they continued. When one person tried to approach, they said, she slowly turned her head and looked in their direction. One of the campers said, her eyes were glassy, but for a moment we saw another face in her eyes. Those who took the diary from there were never seen again. Everyone who looked into the pit disappeared after a while. And worst of all, there are always two reflections in the mirror now. One is you. The other is waiting for your place.